This is episode 34, a listener's Q&A around meal prep and MyFitnessPal. Welcome to the Doc Fitness Podcast, where it's all about developing your mindset, training and nutritional knowledge so you can lose body fat and build muscle effectively while still living a real life. I am your host, David O'Connor. Now let's get into the show. How are we keeping, guys? And a big welcome back to the Doc Fitness Podcast. And today is a long overdue episode. A lot has changed since we've recorded the last podcast episode, in that we have physically gone under a massive transformation of our facility here in Kilcolgan in Galway. I've completely gutted the whole gym floor so we can provide a superior training experience for our clients. So basically, we have tripled the amount of, let's say, training space. We have quadruple the amount of machines that we have to deliver more effective workouts and to offer more kind of broad range of stuff that we can provide for our clients as well. And we've made massive tweaks to our programming going forward as well, just so we can all with the goal really of providing a much better training experience for our clients. That's been super exciting. It's been super stressful as well, but it's kept me under wraps for the last few weeks because things have just been so busy, hence the lack of podcast episodes. I'm not great with podcast episodes on a weekly basis as it is, but this just kind of threw a spanner in the works. But today, guys, is a listener's Q&A style episode that I took some questions off Instagram a couple of months back, and I had them written down to do weeks ago, only getting around to it now. And these questions are based mainly around the app MyFitnessPal, which I'll get into in a second. And there was one question thrown in there about kind of meal prep stuff and the differences between cooked and uncooked foods. So that's what today's episode is going to be all about: meal prep and MyFitnessPal. Mainly we're going to dive a little bit deeper into MyFitnessPal because I think there's some massive takeaways for you to get from there. And if you don't know what MyFitnessPal is, it is a food tracking app for keeping an eye on your caloric intake or your macronutrients, things like your protein targets, carb targets, fat targets. And as I said, we'll get into that more in a minute. But first, let's dive into the first question, which was, where do I start meal prepping for someone that hasn't done it before? Now, I can dumb this down, not so much dumb it down, but I can make this super easy for you. And it's a fail-safe way of prepping food that I go back to, that's so easy to do that anyone can kind of do it. And when you look at your meal, right, and you're looking at your protein source, your carb source, your veggie source, and maybe your fat sources as well. It depends. You might have higher fat sources and higher carb sources, vice versa, in one meal versus another. You might just have a protein source, lots of veggies, a little bit of fats, or the other way around. You might have lots of veggies, a little bit of carbs in there, maybe next to zero fats and protein. It depends on the person, depends on the day, depends on the training day, and your preferences and all those kind of fancy things as well. But from a very, very basic standpoint, we always try to get everyone to look, for 2 to 3 days in advance, try and bulk prep. If it's for lunch or if it's for dinner or for breakfast or for all three or for 2 of them or 1 of them, bulk prep some protein sources. And think about that in the easiest way possible. It is super easy to put together a bacon tray, some chicken stock cubes, some salt, some pepper, maybe some paprika or some other spices that you might like. You can even get chicken mix spices these days. Throw them all into that dish. Have the stock just about covering the chicken, put a bit of tin foil on the top of that, pop that in the oven for 40 minutes, boom, you have succulent chicken or turkey or beef or whatever it is ready for a few days in advance just by doing that simple tip alone. Then you just repeat that. You repeat that for carb sources, you repeat that for your veggie sources. And if you're somebody who's looking at this in terms of fat loss, the easiest thing to do first is focus on your protein, number 1, focus on your veggie intake, number 2, to add the main bulk there of that meal. Like if you are someone, for example, that despises broccoli, like you could steam broccoli and you could throw it in with the chicken at the end, and all of a sudden now the broccoli's turned into something that's a little bit more flavour to it, a little bit more spices, and the kind of juices from the chicken and juices from the stock are flown into that. You can do the same with onions, peppers, etc., as well. The options are fucking endless there, to be honest. And the same goes then for carb sources. Like if somebody wants to bring again, if they're looking at fat loss, we want to be smart with the carb sources that we choose. So they might be looking at bringing a thin style bun with them to work, where they kind of eat Maybe you might throw the bun in a toaster when you get there and you kind of mash it all together, or put it all together when you're in work, not mash it. Or else you might have some like basmati rice, whole grain rice, and mix that all together, put some Frank's Zero hot sauce in there, and you have a super low calorie meal for that. Was super easy to prep. But that's kind of the first way I'd be looking. I wouldn't be looking to get into too advanced recipes straight off the bat, because they can become a little bit, oh Jesus, fuck this, I have to go out and get all these ingredients, I have to wash up all these things afterwards, where I'm just kind of like, look, just do something. It's very, very simple. What do you have at home? Maybe you might need some chicken stock and some chicken fillets. That's about it. You can cook fucking 5 to 15 chicken breasts at one go if you want, if it's for yourself or if it's for a few family members, kids, whatever. It's just a no-brainer, easy way to start. You repeat that for your carb sources. If somebody has, you add a bit of olive oil into the way the chicken is cooked, for example, or vice versa, whatever protein source you're using, and there you're covering your fat sources there already. If you're someone who wants to have, like, let's say your protein source, your veggie source, and maybe you add in some like Ballymaloe relish and a bit of balsamic vinegar, and that's your lunch, again, that's perfectly fine. This makes more sense when you have kind of specific things to aim for, but for now, it's just kind of taking those meal prep principles away. And guys, as well, I had Scott Bapty on the podcast, I think it was last year, or early last year, the year before that, and we went through some super basic meal prep tips in there as well. So what I'll do is I'll pop that episode to the show note on the show notes page for you to click into after this if you haven't already listened to that episode. But that's where I would personally start for meal prepping for someone who hasn't done it before. And all you need to do then is bulk store those in the fridge, and you can kind of chop and change with your meals together. Another reason why I like to do it that way is because if you come home, like if you're prepping a lunch, all you have to do is put all the kind of food groups together and you have your lunch made. If you come home from work and you want like a wrap, for example, you could pull a wrap out, get your chicken, or again, get your protein source, get some veggies, and maybe a little bit of flavouring, whatever it might be, pop it into a wrap. You can toast that wrap, you can have it plain, because the flavors are all going to be in the protein sources and the veggies that you cooked anyway, for example, and have that as dinner. Or else you can make a complete different dish altogether. That's why having those kind of separate sources in the fridge is handy to do that. If you're someone who's going to be away all week at work, you might as well just kind of go ahead, pop them into lunch boxes and have them ready so you can just take them and go. Like another simple thing I'd look at as well when it comes to meal prep is, like, oats is so easy to do. You can literally make oats anywhere. You can add some protein powder into those oats to bulk up the protein content of it. You can make them with boiling water out of a kettle in the office at work, and you could add a little bit of like almond milk to make it a bit more bulky, a bit more flavour to that as well, for breakfast kind of ideas. But for yogurts as well, it's just so handy to get high protein yogurts these days that are highly filling, add a bit of fruit to them. So then already you're hitting your protein targets, already you're kind of getting carbs in there as well. If you wanted to add, let's just say a fucking square of dark chocolate to that, it's adding a bit of crunch, and it's adding some nice good fat sources in there too for you. Again, it's just kind of get you thinking on different levels with this stuff as well. And that's all I'll say for that. Keep it simple, and you can progress from there, and then you can start to experiment with slow cookers and fancy recipes and whatnot, because like anything, meal prep is easy once you do it. It's putting the time aside and scheduling it into your week really is the hard part, and expecting the time, or having the time allotted to do that, because you always underestimate how long it takes to meal prep and the clean up and the setup and everything. So hopefully that helps. Question 2 is a mammoth of a question. MyFitnessPal. Is it good for tracking calories, or can it be negative for your mind? And obviously this person is looking at this because they might have heard that before. But first, let's look at what MyFitnessPal actually is. And in the shortest sense, it's a food tracking app, right? So you can become aware of the calories that you eat across the day, or maybe if you use it weekly, you'll know what you eat across the week. And you'll also know as well, like, kind of like what macronutrients you're getting in, so like how much of that is bringing up a protein, carbs, fats, etc. What kind of vitamins you're getting in. It goes nice into depth, like with MyFitnessPal. That's kind of the whole idea of it. It's handy as well because you can get, let's just take a carton of milk, for example. I can take a carton of milk in my hand and I can scan the barcode on the back of the carton of milk with the app, right? And then you can put in, right, if you had a glass of milk, you can type in 250ml milk, and boom, it puts that to your calorie targets, or puts that into your diary for the day, your food diary for the day. So that's why it's handy. We use it with clients, not from their first interaction when it comes to food, but well down the line. So we might use it with when the clients are either 4 to 8 weeks down the line. We don't like to dive into this straight away because we want to teach some fundamental habits first before we go worrying too much about calorie tracking and that kind of stuff. Because at the end of the day, it is a massive awareness tool to really find out what calories are in what foods. That's the biggest eye-opener with this stuff, right? But the flip side of that is that MyFitnessPal's food database can be added by anyone. And that is dangerous, because some people out there that may not be the brightest sparks in the toolbox, don't even know that's the correct saying, it's definitely wrong. I sound like an idiot now saying it. If they add a food that's completely off, there's no one to regulate that. So like you could go into MyFitnessPal right now, you could type in chicken breast, and you could get 200 variations of a fucking chicken breast, and you don't know which one is which. So that's why when our clients start using it, we know from researching this stuff and doing this stuff day in, day out for years on end, we know what calories are in what foods. So we know roughly what a chicken breast would be raw. We know roughly what X, Y, and Z would be, blah, blah, blah. So if a client is tracking, they're like, lads, I tracked this, it came out as 130 calories, I tracked a different one the next day and it was 170 calories, what the hell is right? And once we get a bit of more information behind it, we can answer that question effectively. So it depends how it was cooked, baked, steamed, fried, what kind of oil, how much oil, etc. Those factors are always going to play in the caloric content of that meal. But that's one thing to be wary of when it comes to MyFitnessPal. But again, let's go back to the basics for a second. We do not just jump in and do this with clients straight off the bat, because we believe we're skipping a massive number of steps involved first. And now that it's 2019 and social media is so big and kind of getting in front of people is so easy, you have every Tom, Dick and Harry that has tracked their calories, that has done maybe a bodybuilding competition, or they've got some great results themselves. Now all of a sudden they want to become personal trainers and motivational coaches, and they go off and they do a weekend cert. They become a personal trainer after 4 to 6 weeks, and boom, they're coaching people without any experience at all. And they're just mindlessly giving them calorie targets, macronutrient targets, and they're trying to track MyFitnessPal. Now look, don't get me wrong. I'm all for people that are trying to help more people, etc., etc. But this is the dangers of the kind of online coaching / personal trainer world. Just because someone has got results themselves does not mean that the way they've done that means it's better for everyone else. And that is why we take a more principle-based approach with it. We start slow, we focus on building habits, and we educate over time. We bring in MyFitnessPal as a tool down that line to get clients a bit more aware on the calories in certain food groups. So we just don't skip a huge number of steps, because it's like fucking Slimmer World, Weight Watchers, or any diet you can pick. Jumping on MyFitnessPal without any knowledge behind food and without any knowledge of what you're doing. Yes, you know you're tracking calories, but why are you tracking calories? Is this the thing that I'm going to do forever? Do I do this every day of the week? Do you know what I mean? All those questions start to pop into play. And when you stop tracking MyFitnessPal, you just kind of go back to square one again. So it nearly becomes like anything. And then people are like, oh, I tried MyFitnessPal before, it didn't work for me. And that's where we take a much different approach to that, so we can use MyFitnessPal as an effective tool going forward, right? We use it for clients that might have a time-based goal. We use it for clients that need more accountability with their food to understand exactly what they're taking in once we might give them calorie targets to get to their goal. That does not mean that they have to do it day in, day out, week in, week out. We get them to do it for a certain period of time, and then we kind of leave it up to themselves what way they want to do it from there. For example, we might have someone use it for 6 weeks solid, and because of such a routine down on their week, they're not going out drinking all around them every weekend and eating soup max at 4 o'clock in the morning. They find it easy to kind of stick to the routine without tracking calories. They're making progress, they're happy out, they don't need to focus on the calorie app the whole time because they're eating the same things pretty much most days anyway. Then on the flip side, you might have a client where they track Monday to Thursday or Monday to Friday, and they track kind of very, very closely, and they kind of under-eating their calories a bit, so then they kind of leave room to relax a bit in the weekend. But because they've done that so well and so right, they're in such a big of a deficit throughout the week, they can kind of be smart at the weekend, relax a little, not track, eat more food, but still be down on fat. Then we have someone who might do it for a week, absolutely hate it, and we have to nearly get them to do it for a few more weeks so they can just learn a bit about food. And then we kind of cycle back around to every few months, maybe when they have more of a time-focused goal, maybe where they want to kind of rein themselves in a little, if they're kind of just going through the paces, etc., etc. This is not a fucking long-term thing. Like, I've used my Fitness Pal twice, I think, in the last 24 months. And the 2 times I've used it, it's only been roughly for about a 6-week burst. One of those 6 weeks is before my honeymoon. And the reason why I like it is that I'm a numbers guy. I kind of thrive off data. And if I know that I'm nailing targets, I will adhere to that and stick to that. Versus someone else who might hate that. They just don't see the point of putting in their food and calories every day because they think it's obsessive. And I completely understand that side of it as well. And that's why we only use it as a tool and we adapt it to the client as it needs be, if that makes sense. Because the second part of this question is, can it be negative for your mind? And the short answer to that is, of course it can. Like, I started on my Fitness Pal back when I was 18 and I did get obsessive with it, but I didn't have any coach help me along the way with that. I didn't understand that this wasn't really meant to happen if I was doing it carefully and doing it right. So you have to take that with a pinch of salt. If you have someone that's in between 16 to 24 or even older, and they're just mindlessly tracking because some personal trainer told them to, or a fat loss plan told them to, but never give them education on what happens 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks down the line. How do you come off it? How do you know, all these other questions, and that person stays tracking, gets super obsessive about food, can't even go out without tracking on my Fitness Pal. That is a fucking problem. But again, it's something that we kind of try to nip at the bud quick if we notice it happening, but we don't allow that to happen anyway. It's happened very, very rarely. Even one of my online guys, it happened to early this year, but after a phone call and working one-on-one with him, we rectify that so he can move forward. Again, all things that you need to be aware of, guys, that you're not just jumping mindlessly into things, because that is where the fitness world is now. If you follow an influencer or someone who's 1 million followers, 100,000 followers, and they say, oh, I'm doing intermittent fasting, and you're like, oh my god, she's in incredible shape, I'm going to do that too. Do you know, it's madness in a way to think like that, because you're not them, and you won't require different things to get to that goal or whatever it might be for you. So hopefully my Fitness Pal question answers that in a way. It is a tool. There is other calorie tracking apps out there that you can use. My Fitness Pal is only one of them. You have to be careful with the food database that you're putting in, because it doesn't mean it's 100% accurate. And again, if you have a coach that knows their stuff in the background helping you with this, they should know how to manipulate that anyway for you. It's too big to go get into in the podcast, and I'll only bore you talking about that stuff anyway. So we'll move on to question 3. The last one is there differences in weights of food? And what they're asking about here is raw versus cooked, right? And then they kind of go on to what kind of variations are there, and is there any effects based off raw versus cooked? Now, this is what I would classify as kind of somebody missing the forest for the trees. You might have read a post somewhere, again, someone with a lot of followers putting this up, and they're like, the differences between raw chicken and cooked chicken is massive. You absorb more of this or whatever it is. Something that's probably not based on any evidence, or one thing is 20 calories higher than another because it's cooked versus raw. This is stuff, guys, that you do not really need to worry about, to be brutally honest. The only time that someone might need to worry about this is if they're in their last 3 to 4 weeks of a bodybuilding competition and they need to really, really, really dial down on their calorie and macro targets leading up to that competition. For somebody who just wants to lose some fat, feel good and look better and train better, you do not need to be worrying about this stuff. If you're somebody who's tracking on my Fitness Pal, yes, we'd recommend track the food raw, because you can be as consistent with that. Because if you weigh a chicken breast and it's 100 grams and you bake it in the oven, for example, in light stock and some spices, and you take it out and it's 85 grams, that can kind of confuse you, or 90 grams. So you're better off weigh things raw. Don't overly stress any kind of variations or different things that you might hear online about it, because it's completely missing the forest for the trees. It's worrying about grams and it's worrying about a few calories that is not going to make a difference at the end of the day. So again, nothing to worry about. Hopefully all those questions make sense. The meal prep one, I like to really dumb things down and make them super simple for you to go off and do. Like, meal prep can be as complicated or as easy as you make it, to be brutally honest, guys. Because even like the first part we went through, looking at just bulk prepping your protein sources, carb sources, veggie sources, and then my Fitness Pal, we went through the details on kind of what it is, and how we use it, and just things to be aware of with it. And then obviously the raw versus cooked question there to finish off with as well. It's getting you to think about things on a deeper level. So when you see something online, or you might read something in an article, you don't just take that for gospel straight off the bat. Hopefully that makes sense. All the show notes for this page or any more resources that I might have, I will put them on Doc Fitness Online /episode 34, I believe it is. Yes, episode 34. And until then, guys, any questions in the meantime, any guests you'd like to see in the show, any topics you would like to see covered, I'm constantly asking for it over my Instagram page at the Doc Fitness. And other than that, have a great week, and we shall chat to you soon. Bye bye.